And we're live. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're watching this episode of the Healthcare Leadership Show. I'm your host, Marion Spears Carr. Thank you for being with us. If you're watching live or watching the recording, please post in the comments. Let us know that you're there. Today's conversation is one I've been looking forward to for quite some time, and I'm really excited to have my guests with me. These are people that have been big influences on me. Cliff Norman and his wife Jane Norman. They've been huge supporters and mentors of mine for quite a while. Probably reluctantly on their part, but I won't leave them alone. I just bug them and I keep bugging them. But Cliff's got a new book out called Quality as an Organizational Strategy, Building Systems of Improvement. And Cliff, I'm glad to have you. I've highlighted you in the on the screen there. Love for you to introduce yourself a little bit, and then Jane, I'd like to get you to jump in and introduce yourself a little bit. For those of you who are watching the show, Cliff and Jane Norman are just giants in the world of quality management and have had such great influences on not just the healthcare industry, but lots of other industries. And I look forward to talking about his new book and talking about his work today. If you have questions, also post those in the comments. Cliff, love to get you to introduce yourself a little bit further, and then we'll introduce Jane and jump right into the conversation about the book.
So Jane and I were both raised in the idea of quality control, all that. Both of us are certified quality engineers through ASQ, and during the Japanese Revolution in the 80s, both of us were confronted with the problem of how do we improve quality and lower costs at the same time. And Dr. Deming was the one that actually mentored us through that, and that caused us to be called upon by our respective managements. I was working at Halliburton at the time, and of Dr. Duran, Dr. Deming, and eventually both of us went to work for Philip Crosby, and then from there I was asked to join Associates in Process Improvement, which has been a godsend. I've been delighted to have had some great people to work around. Lloyd Provost, Ron Moen, Dr. Tom Nolan, Jerry Langley, and Kevin Nolan. All of them were senior fellows at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. And we spent quite a bit of time developing the Improvement Advisor program for the Institute. And also, in addition to that, that same material was used around worldwide with Hewlett Packard. So Jane and I, we traveled the world quite a bit, doing 88 what they called Six Sigma Black Belt workshops, which were really very different. It's what IHI calls an improvement advisor today, and all those workshops were based on Dr. Deming's ideas of the science of improvement. And we weren't interested in people focusing on tools. We were interested in them to understand the underlying theory and then use the appropriate methods and not just have it be a tool show. And so we spent quite a bit of time learning that and working with those issues. And so the problem that confronted our leadership in the 80s, came back in healthcare to how do we improve the quality of patient care and also lower costs at the same time. And QoS, Quality as an Organizational Strategy, is founded on that idea of how do we actually make quality part of our business strategy. So it's not a curiosity, but it's something we're doing on purpose to actually design and redesign a system so that we improve outcomes and also lower costs, which is huge. And Dr. Donald Berwick was a big champion of this at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. Jane?
Hi. Thanks, Marion, for including me. Um,
Oh, glad to have you, Jane.
well, the quality is an organizational strategy. What I've always said is I was introduced to these methods in 1990. So I was in the food industry, and then I used the same methods in distribution. And then I was in all of these, I was an executive in an EHR system called Epic, only it was a small group called Ocean. We were growing from being nothing to a huge, national organization. And then we used it with Cherokee Nation and Indian Health Services. And I'm kind of the practitioner, although when I say that, Cliff always said what he did was I'm an author for one of our books, which is behind me, the blue one, and it's Transforming Healthcare Leadership. But it uses the QoS to get the results, and you'll find case studies, 3 case studies in there, one in Sweden, one in dialysis area, and I think the other one, it was Ocean. So anyway, I'm kind of the old hand that's gotten their hands dirty, and I think here's the difference. When we started using it, we took it out of the quality control department. The executives, the leaders, the managers ran it. We literally in that food industry instituted this in Puerto Rico in a location that had never made money before. And in 1 year, they turned it around. So it's a powerful way of managing and getting people engaged, because people will be excited because they'll be able to contribute, and you show your appreciation. And it's just I can't go back to the old way of managing that I learned at Caterpillar. I have to look at everything. I look at everything through this lens. So thanks.
That's awesome. And for those of you who don't know, I've been in this circle of Cliff and Jane for a very long time. And when the book that she's referring to was still in preprint version, I had an honor of reading a print copy of it beforehand, and my eyes were opened around it. So it's very much a part of the work that I've it's influenced a lot of the work that I do in the executive search. It's called the Healthcare Leadership, Improve Patient Care, Decrease Costs, Improve Population Health. And that was written with Dr. Michael McAbee and a whole bunch of amazing, smart people. But today we're talking about this book. Thank you, Jane, for showing that. This book right here, it's called Quality as a Organizational Strategy. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to y'all about, and particularly Cliff, you and I talked about this in the pre-show, is my audience is healthcare leaders from all across the country, now internationally, mostly in the space of healthcare delivery, be it hospitals, physician practice groups, or on scale, or even small organizations. And one of the things I really liked about the book, your book and your philosophy around quality, one of the things I've recognized and noticed over the years is often leaders look at quality management in the context of the work that they do as the domain of the people in the quality department or the quality management. To your point, Jane, you've taught first line managers how to use these tools to make improvement and make a difference in the organization. But Cliff, you and I have talked about the fact that this is really has to be embedded as a strategic component of the organization from the beginning. And I would love for you to kind of talk about why this book was written. And you and I talked about this yesterday. What was the problem you were trying to solve by putting this book together, this specific book together?
So that's a great question.
Love to hear about that.
So, yeah, great question. And you've given me an opportunity to talk a little bit about the by Purvis Thrash at Halliburton. And he said, there's this guy, Dr. Deming, and he's been on an NBC show called If Japan Can, Why Can't We? And I want you and Bud Pierce to go to Washington, D.C. to see him in 1982. And I had the honor of meeting him on the elevator. And he walked over to me. Two ladies were holding him up. At that point, he was 82 years old.
Wow.
And he looked at my badge and he said, "Mr. Norman, what I'm getting ready to tell you this week will haunt you for the rest of your life."
I love
And I
that
thought,
story.
I'm 29 years old. I know everything there is to know about quality, and certified quality engineer, and you ought to be dead. You shouldn't be haunting me at your age. And I don't expect to learn much here. And then he said, on another note, as young as you are, if you're working for somebody and you're not learning from them, you ought to think about getting another boss. And I thought, wow, that's really important. So I went back to Halliburton after this workshop was over. I went up to see JT Rourke and told him that I wanted to come to work for him. And then he asked me what was wrong with my other boss. And I said, "Well, JT, I may have made a mistake." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, Dr. Deming said somebody to get smart, that could help me. And if you don't know what's wrong, then I'm in the wrong room. I need to go get another room." He said, "Clifford, I'll put a transfer for you on Monday."
Wow. That's awesome.
You weren't in the quality department.
You were in quality at the time, right?
But I didn't have to be a prisoner. But I want to go back to this QA/QC thing.
Yeah.
Because where Jane and I were raised and what they're all about is they have two jobs. They measure and report. And then all of a sudden the CEO of Otis Engineering in Halliburton, he looks at me and he says, "Cliff, if this Deming stuff's any good, then you ought to be able to get down there and solve that $50 million raw material problem I have. And I want to see results." And I thought, whoa, wait, Purvis, I just want to do measuring and reporting. You're asking me to actually do something and create a change. And he said, "Yeah, that's what I'm asking you to do. So don't ask me to go bleed on the holy altar of quality if you're not willing to go do this."
Yeah.
So I walked out of there with a job, and within about 3 months, we took care of that. And then he brought me up. I was a young manager. He brought me up in front of the whole management team. And he said, "Cliff, I want you to sign this card." I said, "Purvis, what is it?" He said, "Well, it gives you $200,000 on your signature." And one of the VPs in the front row, he said, "Well, I don't even have that." And Purvis looked at him and he said, "Yeah, you haven't saved me $50 million. If you do that," he said, "I'll get you one of these cards too, And he said, "Now, I told you when you did this, you need to go make some money for me so we can buy quality here."
Yeah.
And he was a huge supporter, and it just really helped us out. But that change, what the question you asked originally is so important, because the change is going from measure and report, which is pretty passive, to all of a sudden now you're in the front row and now you're expected to get results. And that switch over to the improvement side of things was absolutely huge. And what Deming told me in that first one, what I'm getting ready to tell you will haunt you for the rest of your life, it has, right up to where ASQ awarded medal, which was a nice surprise. But when you go to work and you have to do what he's talking about, he's asking you to change. He's asking you to get in a learning mode. That was the greatest compliment he could give you, that so-and-so's in a learning mode. And his methods are kind of a pain in that way, because it asks you to change. It asks you to learn. And so that's tough for some leaders, because they've gotten to where they are using very traditional approaches, as Jane just discussed. And this is asking you to start thinking about your organization as a system, to give up the blame flame and all the rest of it. And back to the second part of your question is what caused us to get involved in this. And our industries in the 80s, when that program came out of Japan Can, Why Can't We? Jane was losing market share at Caterpillar like there was no tomorrow to Komatsu Tractor. We were beat up, and the executive said, "Hey, we got to do something here. We've got to improve the quality of what we're doing, and we need to lower costs at the same time." Well, that's not what Jane and I were taught. We were taught you go out here and do some sampling inspection, and the more inspection you do, your costs go up. And Deming in that seminar, he said, no, not if you improve a system. If you improve a system, the quality goes up and the costs go down. And I'd never heard that before. And I showed Dr. Deming my 105 at that time, 105B sampling card. It's up to G or H now or something. But I said, well, I thought God created this. He said, no, I know the people that created that. They created that to put people like you out of work. Now sit down, Mr. Norman. We got a lot to learn this week. And it just it was like 4 days of discovering that whatever you thought you knew was worthless. And now it's time to start over. And it was frightening.
I'd like to interject something here too.
Yeah.
When Cliff is talking about Deming, when Deming would give his 4-day seminars, he didn't give people methods. He didn't tell them how to get it done. And the API people, the Cliff, the improvement guide people are the API that Cliff is part of, Associates in Process Improvement. They were his inner circle, I call it. They were there assisting him. But they saw that people didn't know how to do that. I want you to include system thinking. Well, how do I do that? What do? Do you have any tools? No. You need to understand variation. Well, he had the Shewhart chart, so a lot of times that became the thing that most people related to him. If he talked about how people learn, if you think about the Plan, Do, Study, Act, study, not check. The Plan, Do, Check Act is all over on the audit side. We're checking for conformance. Plan, Do, Study Act is the scientific method with the addition of act. That's how people learn. So when you look at profound knowledge, it has system thinking, it has understanding variation, it says helping people learn. And then the fourth part is the psychology, and he didn't understand that. He actually used Maccabee. That's why we ended up with Maccabee. But he did recognize that people had pride in their work when they could contribute and when they were appreciated for that. And there's all sorts of studies out there. Well, I think we were talking about it yesterday. What percent of people are engaged in their work, Marion?
So Gallup, most recent Gallup study, we talked about this, and this is one of the areas that I'm working in as well in terms of the research that we're doing with the work in healthcare organizations. Gallup, the current study, 2024, the most current study in the world, only 22% of people are engaged at work in the entire workforce internationally, 22%. And the number that really blew my mind too, so 22% managers in across industries, this is enterprise wide, and every industry have an engagement rate of 18 to 30% max. Think about that. We have managers, frontline managers across industries that at the best are 30%. 30% of those are engaged in the work that they're doing. And the number's probably more like 18 to 20. So that isn't parallel to the workforce. So I would love for you to talk about that, because that's if we have a workforce, and in healthcare, I haven't seen the actual specific numbers, but the numbers are very similar. They're in the 26% range, right? They're in that range. If we only have a workforce where 25%, one out of four people is engaged, we've got a massive problem. So talk to Cliff or Jane. Talk about how this is so critical to talk about.
What you and Jane were just discussing is so important, because it was a side effect. We didn't see it coming. We were so busy trying to survive and increase the quality of our products and services in the United States. Get car doors to actually shut. My colleagues, Lloyd Provost and Jerry, Tom, and the rest of them were all working in the auto industry. And if you look at an old 1950s movie on Turner Classic Movies, which Jane and I enjoyed, that slammed the car door and it would bounce back, And today now, if you slam a car door, it'll break your eardrums. That thing's sealed pretty tight. And all of that came from trying to compete and save ourselves from the onslaught, which was, Japanese quality. In fact, people would complain that they were dumping, these high quality, low cost products on it. And Milton Friedman said, well, just think of it as reverse foreign aid, And,
I love that.
The job here is to actually try to improve. But this engagement thing that you're talking about is so important. When I was at Halliburton, as I was designing and switching out of the QA QC role into actually doing improvement, Purvis Thrash, the CEO, said, Cliff, I want you to pick out some companies to go visit, and I want you to take the best of what you're learning from all of them. Well, we did 11 of them, Bud Pierce and I, and 2 of them were, we went to Pontiac with GM because they were working on the Fiero project. And then I went to visit, and Ron Moen, my future colleague, was working there, as well as Dr. Tom Nolan. And then I met Bill Schirkenbach at Ford with Peter Jessup. And those people spent some time with me to help me understand the Deming approach. And as I went to other people that were using Crosby and this and that, it became very apparent to me that the leadership philosophy from Deming, the system of profound knowledge, which we now call the science of improvement, was germane. But what Ron did for me is he said, Cliff, I want you to follow Deming around today as he does individual consulting at Pontiac. And so we sat down with his plant superintendent, and the guy, Deming's rough. I mean, he really goes after the leadership team. And you'll see that in Roadmap for Change. It's a video, and the very first part of that, the CEO of Pontiac, he's sitting there with Deming and Ron Moen and all the executive team. And he said, well, the Pontiac customers are no different than the Cadillac or Chevrolet customers. And Dr. Deming said, how do you know that? How do you know that? And he said, well, I guess I don't. Well, then quit saying stuff like that. Put it in the wastebasket where it belongs. And then the CEO said, well, that's why we have Ron over there. And he pointed to Ron, but you can just see. And then he's kind of stunned in the video that Deming's gone after him. Well, we were with this plant superintendent, and finally Deming looked at the attendance records. That's one of the first things he did, because he wanted to see if people were engaged in their work. And this one guy was absent he'd take 1 day off a week. So he's only there for 4 days. So the plant superintendent said, would you like to talk to him? Deming said, I'd love to talk to him. Well, now we're going to get down to some plants. Everything's always my fault. We're walking down the aisle to go visit this guy. And then Dr. Deming looks and he says, I'm seeing the attendance record here. You only work 4 days a week. Why are you only working 4 days a week? He said, well, because I can't make it on 3.
Had to do with that.
And then he said, well, why don't you like coming to work? I said, well, you spent some time there with my boss. You don't understand that by now?
What a great point.
Wow. Back to the office, And so Deming, he strongly believed that it was management's job to help people do a better job. And obviously that's not happening here, because this guy doesn't even want to be in the building, let alone just sit there all day long until the bell rings.
So Cliff is talking about industry, but really, is healthcare any different? We've been working in healthcare since 2001, when we started working with Jönköping, Sweden. And one of the tools that the QOS has is the system map. And it's that system map, we literally had 60 people it was the county of Jönköping, Sweden. We had 60 people. They spoke a little English, enough to get by. And we said, well, in 3 days, we'll develop the system map for the organization. That system map is in the Transforming Healthcare book right now. That allowed them to be able to take us out of the silos of the department and integrate what I do about quality. You're asking, how do you get it out of the department? You have to understand how your system hooks together. You have to know that executives are looking at feedback and technology and regulations and laws and compliance and putting strategic plans together. Those we call driver processes, and they influence how we build our system. The process that we have, and most people look at that, they touch the customer. We call that the mainstay. And then you have support processes. So you can't get rid of any of the processes, but by categorizing these processes and thinking that way rather than in silos. Because if you're thinking organizational chart, how many times do you go to a company and you ask them, well, what does your company look like? And they hand you the org chart. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what their mainstay looks like. We were talking about a company just now that Miriam was talking about that he works with,
Yeah.
and he was telling me what their mainstay was. The
Yeah.
support processes and the driver processes, in most cases, are about the same. We're using
Yeah.
feedback. We're looking at technology. We're looking
Mm.
at legal and regulations. We're looking at strategic plans. We have a budgeting process. Anything that's a plan
Yep.
is what we do. But then we've got to execute it. And if we don't have the right support processes, I was in a company where we had our system map. It's probably the first really complex system map that was done. It was in 1990, and Cliff asked the question of the CEO. He said, let's map our strategic plan to the processes that have to be either run, add resources, or we don't have a process to get that output. Well, if you don't have a map, how would you know? And it was really interesting because we had a fiscal year of September to October, and it was about May at that time. And one of our objectives was to have a cooked food product to give to our general office. And guess what? We didn't have a process to do that because we were all fresh. And it was like, oh my gosh, we better get a kitchen. We got to have somebody assigned to that. We've got to do that. So it helps you see the differences and what you think you want to do, and it checks you. I've done that with we've done it with healthcare. Yon Shipping has done so much with it. It's the system map becomes one of the linchpins of the methodology, I have to say.
So, yeah, absolutely on point there. And I wanted to ask, okay, and thank you for the answer to that long question. A lot of stuff here. If I'm a healthcare leader, Cliff, and I'm, growing in my leadership, a lot of my audience are mid-level, aspirational, they're department VPs, senior directors, aspiring to grow. How do they use what they're going to learn here to build on that? And you talked about learning. One of the things that you've taught me, both of y'all have taught me, and I've told the story 100 times. Every time I come visit you in Texas, I end up having to buy 3 or 4 more books because there's a book I didn't know, right? And one day I said to Cliff, I was like, every time I see you, I got to buy four books because I got to go learn something that I didn't know. And you said, well, you don't hang out with me because of my sunny disposition, do you? And it's about learning, right? So thank you. So how, as a leader, an aspiring leader, can I start with this book and the other books that you do, but this particular book is one we're talking about today, and learn from it and put it into practice? And obviously that's $1 million question that's in the book, but here's the question: where should I start?
Yeah.
If I'm a new incoming leader.
Lloyd Provost, he took chapter 1, which gives a very strong overview of the entire book, and you can read that and get a pretty good idea what has to happen. And then the 5 methods that are in there that they call the 5 activities, that came right off of Dr. Deming's organization viewed as a system that he gave the Japanese in 1950. And it said that, here's the system, and the system should have a name, a purpose, should have measures of that system. It should be able to get information internally and externally so leaders can take care of customers and act on things that are going on internally in the organization. And then they need to be able to put together a strategic plan to actually make improvements on purpose. And unfortunately, that's not what most people do. What they do is they get problems during the day and they chase those around. And then all of a sudden you look at the executive team and it starts to look like little kids playing soccer. Wherever the ball is, that's where they are that day. And then somebody kicks a new problem into the room and then they all chase that around for a while. And this is totally different than that. This is very proactive. As Jane just gave the example, once you have the systems map there, you got all the processes that are 99%
Yeah.
of the work in the organization. Then all of a sudden you can align that system to accomplish the strategic objectives in the organization. And leaders are responsible for that. And then we have to execute. And so the book that Jane has behind her, The Improvement Guide, when we wrote that in 1996, we developed the model for improvement.
Mhm.
And all of these methods, as Jane just hinted, with the Deming seminar, we would sit in there and help Dr. Deming with his 4-day workshop. And the people would come out of there
Mhm.
complaining that, he's given us the theory, but he hadn't given us the method. In fact, one brave soul actually asked that, with 900 people in the room, and said,
Yeah.
Dr. Deming, you've given us the theory, but you haven't given the method. And he'd say, well, if I have to give you the method, then you'll need to send me your check. Because he felt like that was their job,
Yeah.
And the API took that very seriously, and they took
Yeah.
his organization viewed as a system, and the 5 methods that are in this
Yeah.
book come right off of that systems map. And that's what makes this so different, because everybody, Drucker and everybody else, well, you should have a purpose of the organization.
Yeah.
You should have, you should learn from customers. You should do this. You should have a plan and all that. But nothing ties that all together. And Dr. Deming did that for us. He tied all of that together into a system. So the leaders, when they're actually working on that system, and start to build it, and that's the subtitle of the book, Building a System of Improvement to actually make improvements on purpose. And so you go in there, and in chapter 1, there's a grid, a table at the end of that says, how do I currently look? Where am I relative to this system? And it's tough to get like a 4 out of 10 on that thing. If you got a 4 out of 10, you're skating backwards already. And we've had executives take that survey at the end of chapter 1, and they're depressed. And Lloyd and I'd look at them and say, no, you guys are really doing a good job.
You're doing good.
2s and 3s up to 10.
All of a sudden there's a gap from 4 to 10, and they can all see it. And then that becomes their roadmap, Marion. That's I think that's the shortest answer I can give you. But the thing about Deming, and he's kind of a pain in this way. He's asking you to learn as a leader. He's asking you to change, and it's a struggle when you get into that, and all of a sudden you realize that what you've been doing is causing harm. You've been using the attribution error, blaming people instead of the system. And as Dr. Deming would say, 95% of the time it's coming from the system, and it's not because 2 people are rubbing their hands together saying, I want to create a calamity today in here. And that immediately, once we have the systems map there, it reduces the blame. All of a sudden we say, okay, well, what happened in the system? So we start studying that and understanding it, versus a vice president I worked with at Halliburton. He said, well, Cliff, and he'd take out the org chart and said, this is an old so-and-so's bailiwick right here. So go talk to him. So see, I was on my way, propelled by my VP, to go issue the blame. And
but when you use a organization chart, it will cause you to blame people. If you use a system map, you see how the processes fit together or don't, what the mismatches are. Handoffs. If I say handoffs to healthcare, all the recipients of that know
exactly
handoffs.
what you're talking about.
And so the system map has lines between processes, so you know where the handoffs are. And when we've mapped it, there's a couple things that you can do with it. There's some a system map that's in the book that they could take. It doesn't have to be perfect, and start looking at what time what are you doing today, and how is your week going, and check on those areas, the boxes. I call them the apartment buildings, the general, not the individual processes, but where am I having issues and where are the patterns? Where does this always come from? Oh, the care plan, or the follow-up, or the scheduling, or whatever it is. What's doing that? Where's my mismatch? Or I have documentation issues. I got to make it easy to do the right thing and hard to do the wrong thing. Oh my gosh, this process makes it easy to make errors. Oh my gosh. Oh, we need to redesign that. That's the premise. So when you start doing that, then you're thinking differently. You have an adverse drug effect. You start thinking about the system contributors to that, and then you go see what happened here. Oh my gosh. somebody in purchasing thought they were saving us money and gave us a double dose in a vial that has the same color as a single dose. Is it easy for that nurse to pick the wrong dosage? Yes, because they put it in the same place, and that's an actual thing that happened.
Right.
You know, so when you look at the system, when things happen, and you can think about the system, and you go walk and do it, that's how you can apply this, and it will open your eyes. It's like if I take my glasses off and can't see it. Let me tell you, this is like the system map. You see things that you have never seen before.
Well, it's like, Dr. Russell Akoff, he said when we start to work on things, we usually start out with a mess. And using the model for improvement, the three basic questions, and then looking at the systems map that Jane's talking about, causes you to take that mess and start putting it into a position to where you can actually make a real change in the system. Unfortunately, that doesn't pass for a lot of management and leadership. You see it in government and industry. Something happens, some calamity, and then they'll fire somebody. And then it's like, that all take care. Meanwhile, the system's not even under suspicion, and then they'll bring in the new person, and then a few months go by, and all of a sudden we got the calamity again. And we go all back over it again. And the headlines, all that, so-and-so was fired from this organization or that organization. China's even worse. I mean, they'll take you out and shoot you. That guy that poisoned some dogs, I mean, with the bad dog food, they took him out and shot him,
And his top managers. So there's a principle of quality that everybody can use right off the bat, and that's the Pareto idea. 20% impacts 80%. If I'm looking at strategic objectives, what are the, as Duran would say, the vital few? And I think people, if they're not thinking systemically, they're doing what Cliff was talking about, chasing the puck, chasing the soccer ball around, chasing the problem around. When you start looking at it, you can look at it proactively and start saying, how this is designed, let's take a look at it. Oh my gosh. Because the trilogy of Duran, the third part is improvement. So that's when people get engaged in improvement, they have ideas, but they haven't been given permission to do anything. They're supposed to conform, especially in healthcare, and especially because of accreditation. So when you do improvement in healthcare, you have to go back to the policies and procedures and make sure that they're linked together to sustain it. And you have to have good documentation so you can spread it to other locations. And those types of things are important. And so you have to approach it. But I can't eat the whole elephant. That's the Pareto principle. What part of the elephant's going to give me the most bang for the money? And make those decisions. Look for the patterns. Get the subject matter experts involved. And now you're increasing your engagement and then recognize what they've done. That's just so important.
Yeah, we're out of time, and there's so much. Go ahead, Cliff. Yeah, jump. Final thoughts. I apologize. We're right up against the time. So
what Jane went through there is so powerful. But Philip Crosby, he talked about improvement. He compared it to hockey versus ballet, and QoS really takes care of the ballet side. But he said in hockey, everybody's got a uniform and a badge. He said, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, they drop the puck and around. He said about 5 o'clock, it's all over with, and then the next morning starts off with the same, but no improvement going on. He said, improvement's all about, he said, like ballet. He said, they got Ivanov there, and he took out his contacts he couldn't really see. So when he jumped out there, they were pulling the swan boat away, and Ivanov, he missed his spot on the thing, and then he was late getting to the swan boat, and the ballerina went into the lake. He said, and then they said, well, what happened? And they make the spot bigger for him, and he said the next day the performance is better, and it's better, and it's better, and it's better, what Dr. Deming called continuous improvement. And the methods in this book really lay out what you need to have the ballet and get off the hockey game, and the hockey game it makes you old, and it might bring on some other things you don't want to have. And the ballet part of it creates pride in work. And that's what Dr.
Mhm.
Deming said he wanted for people. They have a right to pride of work. And that's one thing Jane and I have noticed with people we work with on improvement teams. We had a group up in Wisconsin, healthcare group, and they wanted to fight with each other. And we immediately brought in the strengths to SDI to help them understand the profile differences. And they told us they didn't have time for improvement. And so we launched the 3 projects with them. And as they were finishing the 3 projects, the lady who said that, she said, we're going to launch 3 more projects. And I said, Diane, how are you doing that? She said, what do you mean? I said, well, you said you didn't have time for improvement. Now you're launching 3 more. Help me understand this. She said, Cliff, we're enjoying ourselves. Will you leave us alone? And I said, okay. So they'd made a contribution. And that's what Deming was talking about. That's what Maccabee's talking about. When you allow people to do that, that provides dignity in work, and that provides engagement. And that'll take care of this Gallup problem that we've got. So that's the side effect of running a ballet versus a hockey match,
And I love that it ties all the way back. If we have a workforce that isn't disengaged, which we do across the industry, this is an opportunity for you as leaders to change that. Understanding that quality as a system is key to, and is a linchpin in a sense, to improving that engagement. Cliff, Jane, we'll put your LinkedIn connections in the comments, and so people can connect with you. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being mentors of mine and friends of ours. And if you're interested, if you're watching the show, either replay or online, go to Amazon, pick up your copy of this book. There's also a companion field guide, right, coming out as well, Cliff, or has already come out.
Yeah.
There's a field guide. If you want to go deeper, grab the field guide as well. Connect with Cliff, connect with Jane. This is the Healthcare Leadership Show. I'm Marion Spears-Carr. Next week, we have another episode at our regular time at 12:30, so check that out on Tuesdays. A lot more episodes coming up also in March and April. Check out past episodes on my LinkedIn page. Most recently with Scott Becker, Todd Dunn talking about transformation in healthcare, which really aligns with the conversation we had here, and some others. So have a great day. Thank you for watching the show, and we'll talk to you again soon.
So, Marion, thanks for having us.
100%. Glad to have you guys.
Thanks.